you've got to explain this. What's with Alphabet? How did you get to that? Why? Explain what your thinking was.
Yeah, and you guys got a kind of free thing because we announced that after we agreed to do this.
Yes. No. And you haven't talked about it much since you announced it. So you're here, and everyone wants to know what the goal was.
Well, we were really just trying to move up in the letters, you know, get closer to A. And now we have
AAA has that covered.
Yeah. We have professional marketing people now, so we decided we might as well.
Come on, did you market test that?
No.
Okay.
We didn't want to tell anyone.
Whose idea was it?
Well, actually, we had a bunch of suggestions we'd gone through, but actually, Sergey I credit for really picking it out of the list.
And
which is only fair because I chose Google, so he chose Alphabet.
Did you have alternatives?
Yes, we did. Can't tell you what those are.
Just one or two of them.
We might use them for something else, so I gotta...
Just give us one of them, just as a teaser?
No, sorry. But it is worth saying, you know, I was actually a little bit worried. I wanted to have a name that people would be proud to work for the company called that. But I actually didn't want it to be too catchy, because the idea really wasn't to have a consumer brand in the way that Google is, but really a brand for companies to be part of. So really it's more for employees as we think about it, and for investors.
Well, so that's really what I want to talk about tonight, because I've interviewed a lot of CEOs over the last couple of decades and watched a lot, and I think the way you run Google is different than anything I've ever seen before. And I'd like to know where...
Well, I never really had another job, so...
Well, yeah, so where did it come from? I mean, where...
An internship here and there, but yeah.
You said from the beginning that Google was not going to be a conventional company, but how did you learn to be a CEO?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I've learned that. I think it's always good to stay humble in these jobs. They're very difficult jobs. I think for me, you know, it's always come back to I think back to when I was like a college student. I was an engineer. You know, I was pretty sure I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to maybe start a company, but do something impactful. And, I had some experience. I worked for a consulting company, and it wasn't that exciting. And, over the summer.
Which consulting company was it?
I can't tell you
You're
what
not
it is.
answering any of my questions.
It was in Washington, D.C. It was a great place to be as a college student, but I was like, this isn't really from a technology point of view. This isn't really that exciting. It's like we're like making software for other companies, and it wasn't that exciting. So I think for me, I was always very, very aware of what computing and what engineering and science could do for the world. I was very lucky to get a computer at age 6 in 1978, so it was pretty early. I turned in a word processed assignment, and the teachers were very confused. It was like 6th grade. They're like, what are these little dots that it's made out of? It's a dot matrix printer. They're like, no one had seen one before.
But did you ever have a mentor to talk about how to run a business, or did you read management books, or did you do any of those?
Yeah, I read a lot of books, and I was joking as we were doing Alphabet. I read like 3 books on naming, which is more than anyone else had read. So I decided I was the expert. Actually, that was useful. I recommend reading things.
Is there a management? What's your favorite management book?
I'm trying to read a lot of different things. It's kind of whatever I've gotten interested in. I'm trying to think of something I've read recently, but it really depends on your interests. I think. I remember I read a book a while ago on the Chevy Volt, which was very interesting. So I've been interested in cars, and we're interested in self-driving things, and but I'm not sure that would be interesting to most people.
Well, so look, here's one of the fundamental things that seems to me is different about the way you run Alphabet and the way many of the CEOs here run their company. Many of them have been to business school. They studied strategy. They read Michael Porter's book, and there's an emphasis on focus and making decisions about what you don't do as well as what you do decide to do. You're doing everything. I mean, you're going to remake, you want to remake the energy business, you want to remake the telecommunications business,
of it.
you want to remake the transportation business, you want to, so can you talk about how, I mean, you heard this from Steve Jobs, I understand. He said, you're doing too many things.
Yeah, I mean, he was right. I mean, he did fine as well.
But you haven't slowed down. I mean, that's why we called you the most ambitious CEO in the universe. And the truth is, we didn't have data on the whole universe, but we you know, it's a lot you're biting off.
Yeah, no, I worry about that, in fact. And I think for me, you know, I mentioned how I wanted to make a company kind of for engineers, like thinking about it that way. I think also as an entrepreneur who started Google, trying to make a company for entrepreneurs also is something I think we're striving for. And, you know, I think in the same way, maybe when I was working for the consultant company in DC, you know, it wasn't really my inner calling. You know, I think for most entrepreneurs, working for companies is also not so great.
Why?
You know, I think it's a combination of companies generally trying to do the things they do well, plus the things that are adjacent. And not thinking creatively about, you know, what they might have learned from doing one of the things they've already done, how that might translate into a new business.
They're not ambitious enough?
I mean, I think it's maybe not that as much as learning from your business. Like, I really like going and talking to the people who run our data centers. You know, but I ask them, like, yeah, how does that transformer work? How does the power come in? What do we pay for that? You know, I ask lots and lots and lots of questions. And I'm thinking about it kind of both as a entrepreneur and as a business person. And I'm thinking, what are those opportunities? So I think in any big business, you know, any of the people here, there's so many little things, you know, that seem like a little annoyance. Like, I remember we're having a problem getting transformers. You know, take them a year for a transformer to show up. You know, that's a problem, but it's also an opportunity. Why does it take a year? You know, why does it get shipped on a train car and then a special truck? And then it, you know, takes a long time to arrive. Is that really the right solution? You know, it makes you wonder.
So how do you decide which of these problems/opportunities to take on? I mean, we were having dinner with Craig Venter. He's focused on extending people's lives. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, I love talking to Craig about it. So.
Yeah. So you're going to be in the car business.
Well, I mean, we're making self-driving cars.
You're putting balloons up over a big part of the world to provide internet business. How do you make decisions? How do you decide which of these areas you're going to go into?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most difficult things. I think some of it comes from experience, some of it comes from just judgment, the right people to judge. Some of it comes from having the right teams in place. A lot of times, many of these ideas, you know, you have this observation like, oh, you know, it sucks it took an hour, you know, a year to get the transformer. And then 10 years later, that might turn into a business because the right team showed up and the right piece of technology. You know, somebody might have invented something new. The right person who understands that might show up. You may, as an entrepreneur, you might say, you know, that kind of all makes sense. And then I think the other thing we're trying to do is say, is that thing really, really important? You know, is it going to affect everyone in the world? Is it going to affect a lot of people every day? I mean, look at smartphones. I mean, there's billions of smartphones.
And so
it's amazing to see.
But what's the threshold? So you're looking for things that you're looking for individual bets that will change the world? You know, if something looks like it's going to cause a 50% improvement, is that good enough for you, or do you have to have 100% or 200%? I
mean, I think it's from a business standpoint, you're looking at the business benefit you might get. But I think also in terms of motivating ourselves and our, you know, employees, potential employees, entrepreneurs, we want to be doing things that are exciting, you know, that are going to really make a difference. And I guess the other, you know, what kind of caused Alphabet for me was, you know, I think also companies have pretty bad reputations in general. It's not like, you know, most people in the world get up and they're like, oh, I wish I could go work for a company. I mean, they do it because they have to. And companies are, I don't know, 90% of the GDP or something. So it's basically everyone all the time.
So if they're that much of the GNP, why do you think they have such a bad reputation?
I don't know. It seems silly.
Well, you obviously have thought about this a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's something we should work to change.
How do you avoid it?
I think we got to be more ambitious. We got to do things that matter more to people. We've got to do less things that are kind of zero-sum games and more things that really cause a lot of benefit.
So too many businesses are either making marginal changes or
Or,
fighting for market share as opposed to...
Or they're just doing things that aren't great, in whatever way.
Do you look at... Is there any company out there that you look at and say, yeah, that's kind of what we want to be?
No.
No.
Or
any...
problem.
There you go. Any CEOs out there that you look at?
There's parts of things obviously we really respect and like, but I think in terms of doing, at scale, doing the investment at scale that we're trying to do, I wish I could just look at someone else and say, if only we did what they're doing.
Some people said when you announced Alphabet, they said, oh, that's Berkshire Hathaway. This is his Warren Buffett strategy. Do you buy that?
I mean, we've tried to talk a lot to Warren and to Charlie and to learn from them. And there's definitely aspects of that we've trying to borrow. Not reinvent the wheel. I think there's things that they do really, really well. And anything you don't have to reinvent, you should borrow those techniques. And I think that...
But when he invests in Coca-Cola or he invests in Union Pacific, he's not saying we're going to change the world.
Well, I think he is in his own way. I think they're doing a lot of interesting things on energy and infrastructure, which I think is really great. I think there's probably a lack of leadership in a lot of those industries, and I think they're working to raise the level of that, which I think is really, really important. So, look, I don't spend that much time studying it, but I think we have a bent where we want to maybe use some of that independence that they've done a great job of, but also do with the technology bent and science and engineering bent.
Do you look at this portfolio like a kind of a venture capital portfolio that, one of these is going to be really big and the other 6 are going to go under?
Yeah, I think we're too early to really know. I think a lot of the things we're doing, we have a lot of conviction about them working over time. But I think a lot of them have the characteristic that they take longer than an average venture capital bet. Now, there are venture capitalists who do kind of crazier things, like a Vinod Khosla or someone like that. And those things are difficult because they do take longer, there's more risk. I think, one benefit we've had is we've been able to, as we've done these things, we cause a lot of attention to get paid, which is both good and bad for us. But if you look at self-driving cars, I guess I had conviction about that, I don't remember exactly, 8 years ago or something like that. And only recently have other people.
Now everybody's competing with you. Yeah.
Which is good and bad, right?
From a change the world standpoint, that's a good thing, but from a corporate standpoint, it may not be.
Yeah, I think we were good to make that call early. And then we also kind of caused it by making that call. We caused a lot of attention to be paid for.
Is that good or bad?
Both. I think it's both good and bad.
Would you do the same thing again?
Sure.
Yeah. What's the piece of the portfolio that you're most excited about right now?
Boy, it's so hard to pick. It's like asking which children you love best.
Which of your children is your favorite at the moment?
Boy, we talk, I guess we already mentioned cars, we mentioned communications. I think, I've just spent a lot of time reviewing some of our things like communications. I think, communications is a really exciting thing. I think, there's very many places you go in the world you still don't have a cell signal. And I think Loon actually could change that. That's the balloons. In a way I think most people don't appreciate.
It's pretty powerful. You're doing that in Indonesia?
Yeah, we just announced kind of a deal with Indonesia, but I think there's excitement in many, many places. And thing about Loon I think people don't understand is it actually, you can use the cell phone you already have in your pocket, and it talks to the balloon. And that balloon is 60,000 feet up, so it's kind of above airplanes. And so it can cover a huge area, you know, and hundreds of square miles. And so you actually don't need that many of them. So it's basically like just a cell tower in the sky. So you think about how cell phones have changed everybody's life. I mean, just think about how having your cell phone work anywhere in the world could change your life, or lives for people in those areas where there aren't that many people.
Billions of people you're talking about.
Currently, it's billions of people, and I think that's why, you know, you see interest from Indonesia, because they haven't built out all the infrastructure we have in the U.S. We spent a lot of money, you know, putting a cell tower in a rural area that not that many people use.
How about healthcare? How significant is that to you?
Yeah, I think, you know, we've seen, I've also gotten to spend more time with those things, so I'm very, very excited about that as well. You know, I think for us, we see some of the opportunity just using data in healthcare. So, I mean, it's all a variety of things. You know, we bought this little company that does these spoons you can eat. You know, if you have a tremor, you can still eat. You know, it stabilizes your tremor. It uses basically the, you know, gyroscope from a cell phone. So I mean, it's super cheap because everything in a cell phone is super cheap now. But a lot of people have this problem, you know, and you know, it sounds, you don't think of that as data, but it's really data processing applied to devices for healthcare. So I mean, all these things used for healthcare, everything, there's opportunities there to use that information better. And I think we're almost kind of, I mean, it's almost like we don't even understand that. I had my sequence done at Stanford as part of a research study. Craig's going to get mad at me because he's been trying to get me to do it there.
And you didn't do it with Craig?
I'll come and visit Craig soon and have it done there too. He tests
It'd be good to compare results.
You know, he'll sequence your biome and all these other things. But just your body's sequence is actually, as far as I can tell, illegal for them to contact you if there's a research study that applies to you. So, you know, we've gotten so hung up on privacy, we've actually, I think, made it illegal for, you know, university researcher to anonymously contact you as part of your being in a genomic study.
Did you learn anything about yourself from the sequencing?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly pretty obscure things, and I think, you know, I think they've gotten to the extent where they can sort of, if you didn't know your family history, they can accurately tell your family history. So 23andMe also,
yeah,
you know, of course, is quite good at this. But I think, you know, that's great if you are adopted or other things, or you don't know your family history. But you can see the technology is going to get better. And I guess by doing my full sequence, you know, I got a bunch of more obscure things that nobody quite knows what they mean. But we'll know, you know, 5 years from now, we'll know what those things mean.
There's a joke that's told about you at Google. We printed this in the story we did last year. The joke is that an engineer walks into your office and says, I've invented...
Oh, I hate this joke, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
You can tell me why. The joke is an engineer walks into your office and says, I've invented a time travel machine. And he sets it up in front of you and he takes the plug and starts to put it in the wall. And your first words are, why do you have to plug it in?
So I guarantee you if you invented that, that's not what I would ask.
But that says something about your management style.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am known for pushing. I think it's somewhat unusual in that I try to go really deep. So, you know, I kind of don't push just for the sake of pushing. I'm not like, well, why can't you do it in half the time? Although I guess maybe I do ask that question. But I do try to understand enough about what's really going on with the sort of physics or the technology or the software to really understand why, you know, maybe we could push harder or maybe we couldn't push harder. So that's why I know about the Transformer story or whatever it is. Because I'm asking, well, why does it take so long to make a data center?
What would you have said rather than, why do you have to plug it in?
Like, let's run it. I don't know. I mean, obviously, a time machine would be pretty cool.
Since this is the Fortune Global Forum and we have an international audience here, let's talk a little bit about Google and China, because I think it's pretty important. China is now by some measures, the largest economy in the world, and if it isn't now, it will be eventually. And Google sort of opted out, and now you're rethinking that.
Yeah, I mean, we still, we've always had operations in China still. We have a big office there and stuff. Android is by far the most used operating system in China, so there's a lot of business that we do with China, and obviously we'd like to do more. I mean, I think, there's been a number of comments about that recently.
Yeah, so how do you think about that?
Well, I also now I've also delegated this question to Sundar.
So you don't think about it?
I mean, I do help him think about it, but I don't have to answer this question now.
Well, yeah, so okay, good. How do you, tell us how you, particularly with this new alphabet structure, how do you spend your time? How do you spend your day? How do you delegate your time across all these different projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. We announced Alphabet, and everyone's like, oh my gosh. But we didn't really tell anybody until we announced it. So, we spent a fair amount of time implementing it. So I think probably that's probably going to take, we're going to do segment reporting and things like that, starting with Q4 results. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff we're doing to make all those things work.
But part of your goal here, if I understand, I read the founder's letter, part of your goal seems to be to create a company where you can get CEO quality people running your divisions, which means giving them a fair amount of latitude.
Yeah, and we've actually been doing that for a while. We just kind of hadn't explained it to people clearly. So we had a lot of confusion. We'd have things like, why is Nest not running ads on thermostats? And we're like, well, Nest actually run pretty independently. That doesn't even really, that's not how we're running it. We didn't have a way to explain that to people. So I think partly this was just us representing reality. It was amazing. A lot of people's reaction in the company was like, oh my God, that was so obvious.
Well, and so if you give the people running those divisions great latitude, what do? Describe the Larry Page job at Alphabet.
Well, I think my job is to create that scale that we haven't quite seen from other companies. How we actually invest all the capital we have and so on. I think we kind of see, I guess Zerga and I would see part of our job is kind of the Warren Buffett part, managing these disparate things well. I've been doing that in a pretty independent way. And then I think part of our job we see as creating new things. Creating new things or buying them at very early stages, like we did with Android. I think we bought it when it was 10 people. And that was something we were really excited about.
So you'll keep going. You'll keep expanding the portfolio.
Yeah, and I think, just looking at how we really invest the resources we have and continue to grow that.
One last question. What do you want your legacy to be? What should your epitaph read?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopefully still pretty young and healthy and stuff. But for me, I think it's really, can we push the envelope of what's possible for an innovative company with large resource to really do things that matter and to really innovate. And for that, to be a significant thing, I guess that's what I'm excited about doing now.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Larry Page, thank you so much for the conversation. Round of applause, please. Thanks very much.